All right, so welcome to the second CARS session that we're doing for MCAT this summer of 12 total for MCAT. In this one, we're going to be talking about the CARS question types and some of the things that you can do to attack them. And we're going to work a passage this time around, and I'm going to sneeze. Yeah, excuse me. I'll edit that out of the recording, I hope. Goodness. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get jumping on this thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about just how to identify the question types and some of the approaches you might have for the different question types. And then we're going to actually put it into action. So there's three basic types of questions that the CARS puts together. And that's, again, it associates with these three CARS types. The questions that go along with the three CARS, which is foundations, comprehension, reasoning within the text, reasoning beyond the text, are the fact that the foundations of comprehensions questions are going to be really just, are you pulling stuff straight out of the passage? I like to think of these as like digging questions. I'm just going to go back to the passage, dig it up, retrieve the information, answer the question. They're pretty straightforward. They usually tell you where you're going to need to look, either by using keywords or even referring to specific paragraphs or specific phrases. Reasoning within the text questions, they're a little bit different because they're going to have you try to use the information in the passage, but say something like, why did the author say it this way? Or what was the author trying to do? Or the author put this here because. They're trying to get you to understand not just what was being written, but why it was being written, like trying to understand what is going on in the passage at a deeper level. The reasoning beyond the text brings in questions that's completely outside the passage, and you have to relate what's in the passage to these new information type things. So what are some of the ways I can deal with the foundations of comprehension questions? I'm going to go through and do those questions first, any day of the week. Whether I'm reading the passage ahead of time or I'm reading the questions ahead of time, I'm still going to skip through these kinds of questions because as a general rule, they are going to be easier to do. Also, by doing these questions first, what is going to be true about your understanding of the passage after you do them? You should have a stronger understanding after you do these questions. And that's what you want. You want that foundation from these questions, and you're digging through, getting the facts and trying to make sense of it so that you can do a better job on those other types of questions that are more difficult. Some common phrases in here that you're going to see to identify these things. These are really common. I'm sure you've seen them. According to the passage implies. It can be inferred from the passage. As far as we're concerned, infer and imply can mean the same thing on a test like this. You don't have to make any distinction between that. In the discussion, so really what they're saying is right there, like identify that. That is where it's going to be in the passage, or the passage in that paragraph implies, and then so on and so forth. Those are the ones that are screaming at you, go there. So my process on these is simply identify the keywords that I'm going to scan for. Look for things with unique spelling, uncommon words, people, places, things. So like your name, people names, place names, building names, things like that are going to be easier to find. Literal quotations and line references. So they might actually refer to in line 4 or 5 of the second paragraph. They're going to give you specific things. Or they might say in paragraph 2, or they might actually give you quotes in this chunk. So those are all good things. And then what I always say is source your answer. Source your answer, meaning don't rely on your memory. Whether you read the passage before you start, or if you read the passage as you go, don't try to rely on your memory. Go back to the passage and make sure what you think it says, it actually does say. So here's a couple examples of some of these questions that you're going to see, like this one saying a common thread in the discussion. That's our key phrase there. Or information in the passage, or according to the passage, or it can be inferred. These are your just classic types of questions that are going to show up with this type. So pretty straightforward. The more difficult kinds of questions are these guys, like the reasoning within the text. Here are some examples of these kinds of questions. What are the keywords here you guys think sort of indicate this is a reasoning within the text type questions? So like in question number 1, what makes me understand that this is different than what I saw before? In question stem number 1, what is it that makes them different than the previous types of questions? Ah, yes, that one refers specifically to the author's argument suggests. So they're referring to a literary construct there instead of like according to the passage. So they're saying the author's argument is doing this job. Okay, what about 2? What is it there that's suggesting this is not a retrieval or go get the information question, but it's more of a reasoning within the text question? Now, which of the assumptions? So we're having to reason through and figure out what are the author's assumptions in this thing. That's something that's going a little bit deeper. I'm gonna have to think about this more. How about number 3? The word reasoning for sure, and most likely mentions. So the author most likely mentions why for his and what reasoning is it? Those are good indicators. And then 4, I mean, we're seeing it right there again. Following assumptions is most central to the author's argument. We're seeing now they're mixing and matching those same kind of phrases again. And finally, number 5, what's in there that's really screaming that it's different than a basic retrieval? What is the function of the statement? It is giving us a line reference or a paragraph reference. It's in the first paragraph and it's giving us a quote, but it's saying, why is it there? What is it doing in that position? So a little bit different of a type of question. So I would always do these questions second. I would go read the passage, draw the information out, questions first. Then I'm probably more prepared to answer these questions to get a better idea of the passage as a whole. So some of the phrases: author's argument, central theme, main point, assumptions, author believes or mentions, like the word author comes in a lot with these types of questions. The function or the structure. Good things to do after you've gone through that first set of questions is start to think about the purpose, the main point, and the tone. And for a second, what is the difference between purpose and main point? What is the difference between purpose and main point when we're talking about the passage? The main point supports the purpose of the passage. Okay, I can see that, but like, let's get a little more granular. Okay, the main point is the central theme or the idea. I'll say it's the main point is the what the passage is talking about. It's the what to the purpose is why. So yes, the purpose is the reason for the passage. And they are distinctly different things. So if they're asking for the main point or the central theme, then they're asking for what the passage is about. And it should always, by the way, include the whole passage. And if they're identifying the purpose, they're asking you to tell you why the passage was written. In tone can actually elucidate the purpose of the main point better. If you understand the tone of the passage, what does that help me understand? Purpose or point better? It definitely goes after the purpose better. Because if I write a passage to be informational passage, I'm probably using a positive, negative, or neutral tone. If it's an informational passage, it's probably positive, negative, or neutral in tone. It's more likely neutral if I'm writing a, it's not expository, what are they called? Opinion essays, or what's the other word I'm looking for? I don't know why. Persuasive, thank you. If I'm writing a persuasive essay, I'm probably going to be using more of a positive or negative tone to that thing. So I would encourage you to use a brief amount of time to write the purpose, the main point, and the tone on your scratch board. Just a few words on each, not like, don't be exhausted, don't write paragraphs or sentences even. And you probably don't need to do a full read of this. You probably can identify the purpose, main point, and tone simply from the questions you've answered already, if there's a lot of them. So think about the word choice as well. The word choice ties a lot into tone, where certain words convey much more information than others. And as always, so is your answer. So what I usually do is I'll say it's narrative, descriptive, expository, persuasive. I'll write that on my scratch board. Then I'll take time and just include a fragment from each of the paragraphs to create my purpose or my main point there. And then I'll usually do double plus, single plus, zero, single negative, double negative as a way to assess the tone. If it's extremely negative, then I'll put a double negative. If it's really it's an extreme type statement. Because remember, we saw before, extreme makes a difference. So assess these things and set yourself up for success by doing it this way. Now, the third type of question are these reasoning beyond the text types of questions. And what do you see in question number 1 that just screams that this is unlike any of the other questions right now? 1, 2, 3, or 4, they all share something in common. Predict, assume it's true. They're not really referring, in the first one, they did say the author's name, Gladstone would predict, but they're just totally coming up with a new scenario. Suppose, there's another great word. So they're coming up with something that's new, that hasn't been in the passage before, and they're asking you to determine what the author is going to think about it. So these are definitely the ones you want to do last. And because you're trying to figure out how would the author think about something else? What would the author think about something else? Strengthen and weaken questions always fall in this category. So if you see a question, which would best strengthen or most strengthen or least weaken or least strengthen, those types of questions always come in this category. Assume or suppose, somebody mentioned that one. Would predict, that's a good one too. Yeah, which of the following would the author most agree with or most disagree with? There's another type of these questions. Or what does the blah, blah, blah represent? What does this thing represent? Or what is represented by? So there's more of these esoteric out there kind of ideas. One of the rules of hand that you must always say that you must always take any new information given to you in these questions as if it were true. You can't decline it because it's not true. You have to assume it is true. Sometimes it tells you straight up to assume it's true. Assume it's true, blah, blah, blah. But if it doesn't say that, you still should assume that these facts are true that they're giving you. Don't question the information in the passage. What's written is the truth. Always assumed to be true. With the strength and weakening questions or agree, disagree questions, don't make that judgment call. Base it on the facts and the facts alone. You don't want to say this is going to strengthen, this is going to weaken. You should say, what do the facts say? Do they agree or disagree with the passage? Not, do they agree or disagree with my concept of what is strengthened or weakened? And look for fallacies, logical fallacies. They've been ever present in the news in the past year. So what are some of these logical fallacies you want to, watch for? I would encourage you guys to visit these 2 websites to learn a little bit about logical fallacies, to watch for them in your reasoning, because you don't want to fall into that kind of reasoning. Like the red herring, probably one of the more common ones that you might be familiar with is that they give you a clue that takes you down the wrong path. Where you're supposed to be going left, you got taken right by this thing. That's a logical fallacy, or a causal fallacy, or an equivocation, or a bandwagon, like just jumping on what you think everybody else is going to think. So be careful of those things. So educate yourself about these logical fallacies. I'll also say that it's kind of a cheesy book. I think it's written for high school level. It's actually kind of cool book. It's called The Fallacy Detective. You can't see it. I'm showing the video in a second. So this book, The Fallacy Detective, it's got a sleuthing dog on the front of it. You can get it on Amazon for pretty cheap. I think it was only like 12 bucks or something like that. And it just goes through ways to identify different types of fallacies in your thinking. So not only is that good for the car section, it's also good for just general usage. So I would say that's a good thing to do, is dig into your logical fallacies that you have. Oops. Now, as far as approaching the questions, I want you always to be doing the process of elimination. Attack these questions, man. Go after them. It's always going to be easier to eliminate an answer than to pick the correct answer. Because, like, think about that one relationship you were in your life where you couldn't stand them, but you stayed with them. Like, I don't know why people do that. I don't know why I do that with answer choices, because you can find every flaw in the word. You're like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But you will still look at that answer choice of that person and go, I can still change it. I can still make it better. And so I'm not calling anybody out, but I'm betting almost everybody's had that experience in their life. Do that with the answers too. You need to break up with the answers, man, because you will fall in love with the answer choices, and you need to just like, no, don't fall with the answer choices. Never pick an answer, because you will always find a way to make the bad stuff good. You need to go in there and just like get rid of things for reasons. Now, I came up with a series of words. I used a slightly different series of words last time, but I wanted to come up with something a little bit more fun. So I was thinking penalties in a football game. So, okay, opposing fact, call it an opposing fact. So it's saying opposite what the passage is saying. Or recycled keywords, it's using language from another part of the passage. Illegal comparison, so it's comparing things that weren't compared in the passage, and so on and so forth. Extreme mismatch, the language does not match, the question does not match the language of the passage. Out of bounds, the answer is not actually in the passage. That's what I was calling out of scope last time. So I try to use these things, and I'm going to use these things when we're going through this passage. I'm going to give you examples of how you can start tearing the answer choices apart, because that's what we want to do. We don't want to pick answers. We want to eliminate answers. We want to break up with those answers. All righty. So what I'm going to do is I want us to try this. So I'll leave this on the screen as along with the timer. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to do a passage. So let's see. In the chat box, I'm going to drop the passage I want us to do. There's actually two passages in this attachment. So we're going to be doing the second one, which is the vegetarian passage. So give me a high sign that you've got the passage open and ready to go. Just like put in the chat box, good to go. When you have the second passage, the second one on vegetarianism, that's the one we're going to do. So I got one thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me a sign so I know when we can move on. 5, 6, 7. So we got a quorum. I will assume that we're mostly ready to go. So I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes, and I'll leave these elimination strategies for you on the screen. So is everybody ready? On your marks, get set, and go. All right, that is time. What do you guys think? Good, bad, ugly? How'd this one go? Not too bad. Okay. Some questions were a little complex. Okay. Well, let's dig into this thing so you guys can see the passage on the screen. Oops, no, this one. This passage on the screen. Don't want to show you the answers. All right, so digging into this, we're going to deal with passage strategy next time. This time, we're just going to jump right into the questions just to sort of see what's going on. So if I look at question number 1, is this a good do now or do later type question? Should I do it now or should I do it later? I totally would do this now because it's that first kind of question. It's telling me really where it's at because it has the imply in it. The passage implies, so then it tells me right where to go, paragraph 2, the Pythagoreans. So I go back there. Now, I want you to get in the habit, though, don't just read the stuff about Pythagoras, because there could be context you're missing out. Read the whole paragraph. Like, this is what I mean by source your answer. Go back, look at the whole paragraph, and then ask yourself, what were the 2 things the Pythagoreans abstained from eating animals because? There was 2 things. That humans and animals share a common soul, and what was the other thing? The diet might have been a healthier one. So there we go. So those are the 2 things. Those are the sources of the facts of the things I'm going to use to answer this question. So how about A, treats animals inhumanely? Keep it or get rid of it? Get rid of it. And I'm going to get rid of it because it's recycled keywords. It's later in the paragraph that they said that. They said Plutarch, humane treatment of animals. So, and this is how I get rid of answer choices. I'm going to get rid of them for reasons. B, treat humans like they are animals. Keep it or get rid of it. And I actually said this is fallacious logic. They're like introducing some logical deduction that somehow people are treating humans like animals that's not discussed in this paragraph or the passage for that matter. So that's why I got rid of this one. Because they don't want to kill living things. Keep it or get rid of it. Get rid of it. And I did this one because I said there was, I'm making sure I'm using the right terms that I'm using. This is an illegal comparison because they're not comparing to killing living things. They're talking about animals in this passage. So they're making comparison to living things, which was never made in the passage. Because plants are living things. So kill something with a human-like soul, that definitely fits our paradigm of what we saw earlier. So boom, there's our correct answer. Booyah. So get rid of the answers you can get rid of, and only then stick with the correct answer because it must be correct due to it being the last thing. Now, on a question this straightforward, and I will say this is a very straightforward question. If you're jumping right to the answer because you did find it pretty easily, that's fine. But I do think that every question, when you're doing practice, should be treated in the same way of have a reason to eliminate. Don't just go to the answer, because if you do it when you're practicing, you're going to do it on harder tests when you're stressed, and then you're going to make silly mistakes. And you don't want to do that. We don't want you making silly mistakes. All right. So what about 2? Is that a do now or do later type question? Is this a go get the information, or is this a type 2, which is reasoning within the text, or is this a type 3 reasoning beyond? I think this is a type 2. This is a beyond, or sorry, reasoning within the passage. So I'm going to skip the 3. Which of the following statements is inconsistent with information in the passage? Do now or do later? So number 3, do now or do later?
Do later.
Why do later on this one?
I think we need to have better idea of like what's going on with the overall passage.
Okay, so I do think this one's not a do later, it's a do a little bit later, because it's still just dealing with the information straight from the passage. But okay, I agree with that. So question 4, a reasonable expectation for something such would be that. Ooh, do later or do now? Surprisingly, I would do this one later. A reasonable expectation for someone who accepts Schopenhauer's views would be, well, that's a type 3. That is totally a type 3 because they're giving you new information. They're never talking about people out of the north or carnivorous animals would be evil, or none of that stuff is explicitly in the passage. So, and I'll label these as this is 1, this is 2, this is kind of a 1-ish. This is definitely a 3. I wouldn't do that one right now, because it's asking me to make make a judgment call. So I would jump on to 5. The other study associated with raising has tended to show that. Do now or do later? I would do this one later myself as well, because the author study is intended to show, so they're actually talking about the purpose of the passage, is it not? So they're asking why the author wrote this thing. I would do this, call this a 2 and do it later. Yes, I'm skipping a lot of questions, and this is what I would totally do on a real passage. Then I go to 6, oh, now here's my home base, man, based on the passage. Home base, do now or do later? Oh, totally now. This one's like based on the passage. It's reasonable to conclude that morality is significantly affected by. So we have to figure out where the morality information is. Where are they discussing morality? Last paragraph. Okay, so I would probably read my last paragraph in pretty good detail. So they're saying moral status of animals given to support vegetarians. If animals have rights, are entitled to have interests. Difficulties in claiming. Presumably, this is how I read, by the way, when I'm reading. Ethical arguments for be based on the view that highly prized animals will kill for food. Blah blah blah. Good to the animals is allowed. Okay, so and I'm doing a little bit more clear reading than that when I'm actually doing it, but now I feel like I'm ready to answer the question. So morality is significantly affected by how much the moral issue affects us. Keep it or get rid of it. So I've got to keep and I got to get rid. We have a tiebreaker. Okay, why am I getting rid of it? Getting rid of it. Now we got more get rid ofs. Why are we getting rid of it? What reasoning do we have? You always have to have a reason. The moral discussion involves non-humans. So I think that's hedging on it a little bit. That I would say that it's because, I mean, A is not a terrible answer, how much the issue affects us, but we're talking about how much it affects others, other people, other animals. So I think it's a flip-flop. I think it's an opposing fact, in my opinion, and that's why I would get rid of it. I think that's kind of what you're hedging on, right? The moral discussion involves the non-humans or the other things in the passage. I would agree that's a pretty good way to get rid of it. Opposing fact, foul, 5 yards. All right, B, keep it or get rid of it. What we believe we deserve to have. Keep it or get rid of it. Why are we getting rid of this one? Yeah, this is not even in there. So what are we getting rid of it? Use my terminology. Out of bounds. That's not in the passage. It's out of bounds. Get rid of that thing. It goes outside the bounds of the passage. All right. The effects of our actions on others. Keep it or get rid of it. Keep it. And there's a really strong indicator to keep it, by the way. Here's things you should recognize. A and C, what is their relationship? They're opposites. They're basically opposites. And since A was it was like opposing the fact that we saw in the passage, it's not about how it affects us, it's how it affects others. C is the really good answer choice. Look for things like that because it can help direct your choices. And then our intentions more than our actions. Keep it or get rid of it. Why are we getting rid of it? Totally out of bounds. The passage never talked about it, especially this paragraph never talked about intentions versus actions. So it's not discussed, therefore it can't be an answer choice. Let's get rid of that puppy. Okay, now we got to do some of these other questions. Well, we also got to choose our answer, which must be C. I would probably not do 1 or 3 yet. I agree with you guys. I would probably go to 2, number 5. The author studied the ecological damage associated with raising meat is intended to show that. So what do you think the purpose of this passage was? What was it intended to do? These are always questions where I ask myself that first. I answered my own words before I actually answer the question. What was that chunk in there for? In fact, where was that chunk? Raising meat, the damage associated with raising meat. Yeah, that was the 4th paragraph. So this is when I actually read my 4th paragraph in detail. All right, so this applies essentially. So context says the greatest philosophical arguments that argue the greatest good for the greatest number. In ecological terms, this prohibition on eating meat arises from the well-documented inefficiency of much animal raising. This applies instead of hence concern for world hunger for the land and conservation for an ethical basis of vegetarian diet. So I would say, in my opinion, the way I would word this is that they're using it as an argument to say it's for the good of everyone if we don't do this kind of farming. So that's what they're trying to show, is that this is damaging. So that may or may not answer the question directly. And I don't see that answer in here. That answer that I just came up with is not in there. And that's okay. That's all right that it's not there. So then we just got to address our answer. So A, there are other ways of raising highly nutritious food. Keep it or get rid of it. Why are we getting rid of that? There are other ways of rating high. So is that what that point was put in there to say? Was that the intention of it? No. In fact, it doesn't even address that, because is there literally any other highly nutritious or ways of other ways of raising highly nutritious food in there? Out of bounds. That's not in there. It's not mentioned. Notice, by the way, out of bounds you're going to use a lot. If it's not in the passage, you can't answer the question. There's a philosophical logic to vegetarianism. I'm going to keep it because I read the whole paragraph. Now, somebody had said, and this is why I didn't bring it up, somebody said the end of the 4th paragraph is where they're talking about ecological damage associated with raising meat, blah, blah, blah. Why was that not the thing to do? Why is it better to read the whole paragraph? You get the context and you see that the first part of the paragraph is talking about scientific rather than philosophical. However, the greatest philosophical arguments then argue for the greatest good for the greatest number. So if you only focus on the statements about raising food or raising cattle, etc., you're not getting the context and you're not seeing that this is actually a really good answer. It's a really good answer. And then C, meat is not economically accessible to most people. Keep it or get rid of it. Why am I getting rid of it? Out of bounds. It's not talking about economic accessibility of foods. It's not at all there. Get rid of it. Meat is generally bad for your health. And why are we getting rid of this one? You might say out of bounds, but it's not really out of bounds because it was discussed in the passage somewhere. It's just they're recycling keywords. It's not in this context where it was actually discussed. So sometimes you'll see those, sometimes you won't. If you said out of bounds, I think that's fine. And so our answer is B. So this is how we can tackle passages very effectively. Now, we don't have time to get through every single question, although I will tell you the answer to all the questions. But do you see what I'm trying to point you towards as far as attacking these questions? And I really mean attack these questions. I don't want you looking at them going, I think this is the answer. I want you to do what to each and every answer choice. Eliminate, assess, like basically, I even want you to literally to say attack it. I want you to attack every answer choice and try to prove it false. Because if you can't do that, then it's more likely to be a correct answer. So get in there, get your hands dirty, start throwing, like throw something at the wall at that question and see if it sticks. And if not, have a reason for getting rid of it. Don't just get rid of it because I don't like it. Get rid of it because you have a good, solid reason to do it. Everybody got that? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you're like on the same page. So the answers to the other questions. Question number 2 is B. People who think vegetarianism is as an ethical issue. Question number 3 is A. Starving people should eat animals before resorting to cannibalism. And then 4 is D. People who live in the South would not eat animals. That's like the whole north-south thing. That's not really even dealt with in there in any direct way. That's why it's a question type 3. So go through those. Figure out why, if it matched and why you differed from that. Ask yourself that hard question. Did I eliminate for a good reason or did I just pick an answer? All right. So let us share what's going on in the whole neck of the woods of the MCAT. So next week, or in the rest at the end of this week, we're going after the SIRS question types, the different types of science questions, and we're going to do it in a different way. Science works a little bit differently than the cars, and there's a lot more strategy around it rather than this attack and eliminate type mode. So we're going to do that on Thursday night from 6 to 7. We are holding that mock exam at the end of next week on July 24th. If you haven't already signed up, you can always sign up at hpa.ucdavis.edu/testprep. I will be sending out additional information to those who have already signed up by Wednesday on how to set up your accounts for these different places and these different tests. And then, as always, Monday, 8 to 12 in the morning, I am doing drop-in office hours. The recordings will end up being on our YouTube page. I'll also link them on the test prep page. I'm still waiting for the last session to get up there. It'll take about a week or two for each of the recordings to get there. We just have a slow turnaround on that, unfortunately, but they will be there. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys for coming. I will see you on Thursday to talk about some science question types and start hacking those to pieces, but we'll do it in a different way. And always be aggressive, be aggressive, be aggressive, be aggressive. And yes, I'm leaving that in recording.